Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between. With me, your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back to the Underwater Podcast, and this week we're ditching the scuba gear to talk with Master Freedive instructor and cold water specialist, Roberta Cenedese. Based in Vancouver, Canada, Roberta often works on film and TV sets, coaching actors for their underwater scenes. She works alongside stunt performers as part of their safety team and provides guidance to the production on how to achieve some of the technical shots they're going for. We chat about breath-holding techniques, how dangerous cold water can be, and how amazing it was working on a show like Siren. Alright, let's take a deep breath and dive in. Roberta, welcome to the Underwater Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. We haven't really had anyone on the show yet who kind of teaches what you teach, which is like the free diving and the diving side of things. Talk me through what it is that you do of what your career is.
I worked for 20 years in the film industry as a production coordinator.
Oh, okay.
And I did that for a really long time. And while I was doing that, I was able to, production coordinating is as steady a schedule as you can get in the film industry and the film and television industry. And so I was able to train and compete in free diving and open water swim races and do my athletic pursuits as a competitive athlete. And then when I decided to retire from that, I decided to retire from production coordinating because I really did not enjoy sitting for, 12 to 14 hours a day in the office. It really was, counter to who I am as a person. I'm super grateful because it gave me the stability to compete and pursue my athletic pursuits, but I wanted a change. So my husband and I decided to just go traveling for a year. And then when I came back, before I had some time to think, I had no idea what I was going to do next. And so I decided, since I was no longer competing, to teach because there wasn't really an active community in Vancouver at all, or a structured freediving community or open water swim community, really. There was a small group of open water swimmers that sort of swam off one beach, but nothing organized in the way that I wanted to see it, which was really a lot more challenging and competition based.
So a bit more advanced?
Yeah, I think just a bit more. I've always been someone that's pursued individual athletes, or individual sort of athletic pursuits and individual endurance pursuits. So it wasn't like I wasn't as interested in going out and swimming a loop in the ocean as I was of like, can I get from this spot to that spot in one swim?
Right. So a little bit more motivated, a little bit more kind of goal orientated.
Yeah, goal orientated and driven. And I've, obviously both of my pursuits that primarily interested me, freediving and open water swimming, were pursuits where you really, really have to adapt your body to what you're doing. And that's really what I find exciting, seeing what the human body is capable of doing. Yeah.
And because you're in Vancouver, so it's cold water, right?
Yeah, it gets cold. And, I swim year round in a bathing suit. And it was just really interesting to me to see how my body could adapt to colder and colder water for longer and longer periods. So that like in January, when the water gets really down to like 8, sometimes 6 or 5, I could still swim for half an hour. And I thought that was really, really cool. I was like, that's really neat that my body can do that. And it's really neat that I can hold my breath longer and longer.
And it's kind of like a superpower, right? Like you kind of feel like you're pushing the limits of your own body to be able to do these things.
A lot of people say that, and I actually take the completely opposite approach. I mean, I love saying to my students, like, I'm a little old middle-aged lady and I can do it. So if I can do it, everyone can do it. It's all within us. It's just a matter of taking it super slowly. And rather than it being a superpower, I like to think of it as unleashing what we have within, that we just, that's natural to us. We are mammals, just like the seals and sea lions we see are mammals. I mean, they're marine mammals, but we can do the same things. And actually the same physiological events happen in our body as happen in theirs when they're holding their breath. So I like to approach it that way because, and this ties in really neatly with the work I do on set, I'm often dealing with people that maybe have a fear of water or, come to it really not confident. And my job is to say, like, especially on a film set, is to make it so that the fact that they're performing in water is something they're not thinking about at all. They need to focus 100% on their performance and their communion with Braden or whoever's behind the camera and what they're doing. And my job is to remove, any tension or anxiety around the fact that they're holding their breath and doing it underwater or in cold water.
Yeah. And so you've got people coming to you who may not really be interested in doing these things underwater, but because of a role and because of what their job has said, they have to learn how to do these things to be able to do a certain scene.
Absolutely. And so sorry, I never finished your original question. I decided to teach. And so I started working, training people from beginners to now we're getting to a much more intermediate and advanced group in Vancouver that are training and working with athletes, specifically overcoming like psychological boundaries and physiological roadblocks when they're trying to get deeper and deeper. And once you're descending past 30 meters and 40 meters on a breath hold, like different elements come into play. And there's that. But then all of a sudden, Braden pulled me into working on film sets, and I'm dealing with completely different people. I'm dealing with people that have never had an interest in being in the water. And like I mentioned earlier, that actually some people have a fear of it. So it was really interesting to work with them. A lot of what I do when you're doing any kind of like adaptive work, like, what I mean by adaptive is adapting your body, adapting your mind to a completely different environment when you're taking yourself out of breathing, which is like a basic thing that you feel you need daily. It's a challenge, and you have to create an environment of safety. You have to be on your game so that whatever you're asking them to do at any point, they can say, I want out, and you can get them out one way or the other. That's the first thing. But, you have to make them believe, and you have to allow them to know that they can do this by having them do their own breath holds beforehand that are like twice as long, 3 times as long as anything they'll need to do in the water.
Yeah. So you overcompensate to give them that kind of comfort feeling, to make them very confident.
Absolutely. We start with very basic stuff, and especially people that are fearful of the water or don't think that they have the ability to do what's required in terms of moving through the water and heavy costumes or, whatever they need to do. We start out with the very basics and we build them up so like everyone that's entering the water to do anything with us has done like a 130, 230, 3-minute breath hold beforehand.
Yeah, which is incredible. For just regular people. And I think for me, that's what when I mentioned the superpower, it's not like it's something that ordinary people can't do. It's just that, like you say, it's finding that power within you that is a purely natural response that your body's got. It's just has trained yourself to not be able to do it.
Absolutely. For most of us, whether we're athletes or, like the actors that I work with or whatever, go in with the belief that we can't do it, whatever it is, whatever we attempt for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of us, have that belief that like we're never going to be able to master this. So we just take that all aside and say, this has nothing to do with what you're doing, but we're just going to work on breath holds to just, relax and get into it. And then the first time they do that, the first time they come up and I say, okay, that was 205, they go, what?
Yeah, right.
And then you go, and our takes are going to be 15, maybe 20 seconds long. And immediately you just see the shoulders go down and they're just like, okay, what do I need to work on, to make that 20 seconds perfect?
I can do this. It is totally possible.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So, and that's like, it's just it's been such a satisfying experience because I get to be there every time and see that. That's a really privileged position to be in, to see somebody go through this transformative experience and come out knowing like that they can do this.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to be there and see that over and over and over again.
Absolutely. I mean, so talk me through like the process of coming onto a production. So say something like Siren, where you're
Hmm.
with Braden Haggerty, who's the underwater camera operator. What is the process of you coming onto that production, and then how do you get involved from there?
Well, usually when production contacts Braden, she will recommend that the performer, I mean, they're going to talk to her about what can and can't be done. And she will recommend that the performer work with me. And so, I mean, on Siren, we had a lot of support from our producer, Tracy Jeffrey, who's awesome. She's
Yeah.
amazing. And she was like, absolutely, how early can we start? And I mean, for some of the performers, Aline, our lead, Aline Powell, we started her in England. I just reached out to a really amazing instructor and British national record holder there, and had her work with Braden before, or work with Aline beforehand. And then she came to Vancouver, and we just immediately started working with her. I worked with Alex, the male lead. We worked with Fola. We just worked with anyone that we knew was going to be underwater. And we
Yeah.
just set up pool sessions, and we do scuba training work with them. And I'm not involved with that. Usually Braden herself or Jeff Hottie, who's another one of our commercial safety divers. And we do a lot of breath hold training. So first we just do breath work, dry. I explain the process of what's going on in your body, and just, it's very, we're not pushing people. I just want to see where they start at, because that's going to be something I can tell the stunt coordinator, I can tell Braden, say, look, I will know pretty much after day one where I can go with this person.
Right. What their comfort is and whether they're going to be receptive to being pushed or anything like that.
Exactly. And whether how much they're going to be able to do on their own, or how much support we're going to need from a stunt double. So, just having those conversations. And that's really about the performer's comfort level, because there's no point in having them there underwater pushing them. You're going to lose performance when they start to feel uncomfortable. So we work together. We practice our breath holds. We get in the water. We practice them in the water while they're nice and comfortable and warm, and wearing a mask. Like, we give them every benefit to be comfortable. And then we slowly start peeling away all those tools. We'll take their mask away from them and have them experience the feeling of, water in their eyes, have them experience what it feels like having water in their nose. And then we'll, take off the wetsuit, and maybe throw on some costumes, and, all of that stuff. We work really carefully and slowly with people's ears to make sure that they can equalize and do what they need to do in the pool. So I'll have them hold weights in their hands, because that's a big one when you first tell people we're going to be putting like a lot of weight on you because we want you to sink to the bottom because you're drowning in
Yeah.
this tank.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
terrified of that. So we do a lot of
It's
that in a pool with, blue tiles and bright lights, and, mask on, and just holding weights that they can drop at any time.
right. So you make them entirely comfortable in that process so that they've got the control of it to let go of things and they can see everything and it's all nice and safe.
Totally. We have a lot of training sessions. So, some people need one for what they're going to do. They're going to be, you know what I mean? They're going to be standing on a platform underwater with just maybe a couple of feet of water over their head. And they could even hold weights in their hands if it's like, a close up
Yeah.
or whatever. So they'll need one training session and they're good to go. And other people will need more, especially if they need to move underwater. And Siren, the big issue with Siren was, of course, moving like a mermaid, learning how to kick a dolphin kick, which is a totally different technique than a regular kick. And it does take work. This is something that, you know, competitive freedivers spend years on developing this technique. It's not easy to move through the water with a monofin on.
Yeah.
So, we do more training work, and everyone on Siren, all of the mermaids were amazing. Like, I just gave them some pool fins and said, go train on your own. And they all did. They would just go to the
Oh,
pool and
great.
do some surface training, like some safe training that they could do without supervision, not on breath hold. And they would come back each time improved. And then we
That's
could
great.
move on. Yeah. I mean, even,
Yeah.
even, little Alex, who played the littlest mermaid, on season 3 of Siren, I mean, she's just a tiny, tiny little girl, and she had
Right.
tons of action underwater, holding spears and attacking things and swimming with the monofin. And we had to buy, a child's monofin. And she just was like, and her father and mother were amazing. They would just come to a training session and then just go and train in the pool.
Yeah.
And I mean, she was amazing. She was swimming like a little mermaid. She was just motoring across the tank and using her spear and performing and wearing like prosthetic teeth. And it's not an easy thing to do for adults.
No, let alone a child. How old's Alex?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think she was somewhere around 8 or 9.
Oh, wow.
Just
Yeah.
a tiny little thing, and just
Yeah.
bang on.
And it
Just
would have been
able.
like a dream come true for her as well, I guess, if she's at that age, probably into mermaids, and if she
Oh,
likes swimming.
absolutely. It was for all the women that came in and played mermaids. It's like, I
Yeah.
get to be a mermaid. But yes, for her it was really exciting for her, and she just really I was really blown away by how hard she worked and how willing she was to just, okay, one more time underwater, we're going to relax, and down
Yeah.
you go. And she did it. I mean, she
That's
did it.
amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do you give them homework to do? Like, are there exercises and training that they need to go away and do and come back?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What does that involve?
Mostly doing a lot of breath holds.
Yeah.
And then reporting back about issues or what comes up when we're doing breath holds. So doing them dry, once again, breath holds in the water should only be done with another certified or trained, free diver there that knows how to react to anything that might happen. So we never ask them to hold their breath in the water without me there. But I give them dry breath holds to do, and different types of techniques, different types of breath holds. So like either a series of breath holds with timing in between or just relaxed breath holds. And then in terms of the movement, we can do a lot of it at the surface with small pool fins, breathing. So just really focusing on a dolphin kick, which is a completely different technique, and just developing that flow. Because, I don't know if you have ever swum with someone that grew up swimming, that was like a competitive swimmer from childhood. And they're just like, there's an understanding on how to move in the water that no matter how much you train, if you learn to swim as an adult, you'll never pick that up. It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
That understanding, do you mean like how the water resists against the body and how to kind of move through it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Streamline is massive for us. But of course, it's not always available when you're performing on camera. You have to assume whatever position you're assuming. Like when we teach free diving, it's all about streamline and it's all about relaxation. So slowing down the heart rate, consuming less oxygen, creating less CO2, keeping your head in line. Well, obviously, when you're performing, we want to see your face. Your head's not going to be in line when you're swimming through the water. You're going to be head up so we can see your face. But we start with that, right? We start with that because as soon as that clicks for someone and they go, I felt it.
Yeah.
I felt that I just flowed through from one end of the pool to the other and I didn't have to breathe. It was easy. It felt comfortable. Then we can start going easy. So that's available to you. And now we're going to start like messing it up a bit. We're going to start taking your head up. We're going to start throwing clothing on that's going to be drag. We're going to start, messing with your tools, changing your fins or whatever.
Because it is a lot like aerodynamics, isn't it, under the water?
Absolutely.
You've got drag, and if you're trying to be conservative with your air and your oxygen in your body, you want to be as streamlined and as sleek through the water as possible.
Absolutely. And when we train our athletes, I'm sorry, I'm flipping back and forth between
it's good.
set work and training work, but you get a lot of people that start freediving and they immediately want to go to work doing all these crazy exercises to extend their breath hold. And I always try and explain to people, if you put that effort into developing your posture and into developing your kicking technique and your streamline, you're going to get a much longer breath hold underwater than if you just work on your breath hold. Because it's all about technique. It's all about drag. It's all about streamline. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's something that happens because I'm an underwater photographer. I shoot with clients a lot, and I shoot with a lot of people who have never done it before, may not even be able to swim. And what I find is that if they're out in the water, so say in the deep end, which is, sort of 8 feet for my studio,
Hmm.
is trying to teach them how to get from the surface of the water to the bottom of the water to the bottom
Hmm.
of the pool.
Hmm.
It's a little bit of an education on aerodynamics, because
Hmm.
they're like, okay, I'll just push myself down a bit, and they push down. Their feet are flat, their legs are apart, their arms are out, and it's just creating heaps of drag, and they go like 2 feet down. But then once you teach them how to point their toes and, like make yourself like a torpedo under the water, then they push themselves down and then they smack into the bottom. They're like, oh my God, that was incredible. Like they just moved like 3 times as far as I did before. And as you
Yeah.
say, for those of us who grew up in the water, we understand that's how it works.
Hmm.
But for other people, it's teaching them or training them to think of things in a different way.
Absolutely. And I'm actually really grateful for this kind of an experience, because when you've, spent decades in the water, you forget. It's so easy to forget what it was like the first time for
Yeah.
yourself. So this is like always a really good reminder for me about the basics, and it reminds me things that I need to be doing, and it reminds me what I need to be bringing back to my advanced athletes, like just the real basic things about how to move in the water. And
Yeah.
one of the big things we do a lot is work on equalization, because if they can equalize quickly, I just give them a bit of buoyancy at the surface of the water. I mean, our tanks are 16 feet deep, and sometimes they do need to perform on the water, and they need to go from the bottom all the way to the top. And I'll just be there with like a 20-pound weight in my, at the surface, waiting for them. They're breathing, they're relaxed, they're ready to go. And then as soon as they're ready to go, they'll take the weight and it'll just take them down to the bottom. And then they can just drop it at the bottom and float up completely buoyant. And so once I see them getting really comfortable in that, like that, and going, no, no, I want the weight, and I don't want to do this on scuba. I want to do it on breath hold. That's the satisfaction. You've got people that are coming up with their own ideas on how to make the shot look better. It's pretty
Right.
cool.
And that's great, because you're giving them the techniques and you're giving them all the tools for them to then be able to create a way for them to do this their way.
Exactly. And that's my job, is just to like be able to sort of be in the background and allow the performer and Braden to have this communion between them,
Yeah.
where they're just
Yeah.
so comfortable and they're just able to talk about what they want to do, how they want to be on camera. That's super satisfying to see that, and to see people that are then like pushing their own limits without any kind of direction, going, well, can I try this? Well, and it's like, sure, let's go for it. Let's give it a go. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk us through the actual physiological process of learning to increase your breath hold. What is free diving, and what is the techniques of lengthening that breath hold?
Yeah. So, free diving is basically the idea of snorkeling, but just taking it underwater. It's just taking a breath and going underwater and exploring the underwater environment on your breath hold. So the
Yeah.
same thing that seals do, and sea lions, and, dolphins and whales, that's what we're doing. And a lot of people think it's about having the longest breath hold possible, or going super, super deep. And certainly for elite free divers, that are competitive, or when you get into the competitive scene, that's an element of it. But it's mostly about, and especially on a film set, accepting whatever breath hold you have and not trying to judge it, and just trying to do as much as you can underwater. And as
Yeah.
soon as you start removing, and this is really integral even for high level athletes, as soon as you start removing this idea that it's got to be longer, it's got to be better, immediately you're able to sort of have a longer, better breath hold. What's happening when you hold your breath? Every time we breathe, we take in air. Whenever we move or do any kind of action, we burn the oxygen and we create CO2. And what actually makes us have that feeling that I need to take a breath is not less oxygen. We're still really oxygenated. It's the rising levels of CO2. You get to a certain
Right.
level of CO2 and your body is just automatically set to offload that CO2, take in another breath of air. So very basically, what we're trying to do with people is learn how to breathe deeply, diaphragmatically. And for actors, actually, they usually have a step up on that, because they're used to performing and having voice control. So they all come in understanding what a diaphragmatic breath is.
Which is basically breathing into your belly, right?
Yeah, breathing into your belly, filling your ribs, like not using the top part of your lungs only, not breathing into your chest. We call it belly breathing. It's what babies do. If you watch a baby, you're going to see when they're sleeping, you're going to see their belly going up and down. Or if you watch a cat, or something like that, you're going to see the bellies going up and down, not the chest. So we're just, first of all, lying people down and having them actually breathe diaphragmatically and take a moment to let go of any external thoughts, any stresses or emotional tension, and any physical tension. So we all hold tension in our body, and largely we walk around being unaware of where we do that all day long.
Yeah.
We're either sitting at a desk with our shoulders up around our ears, or, our hip flexors are super tight, or, whatever issue we have, we all walk around holding that. So it's just really becoming aware of where we hold tension and really trying to deepen and relax the body completely. Even little things like, some people, it's super hard, and I tell them, like, put your head back in the water. Let the water hold your head, hold your head, hold your head. Like, relax your head, relax your head. And it's just, they just can't let go of holding their head up. That's actually more common than you would think. And our head weighs a ton. It's enormously heavy. It involves a lot of work holding that head up. So it's finding where it is that you're holding tension and using energy and burning through oxygen. It's tiny, tiny movements. And then we just, this is very simplified, but with a really deep diaphragmatic breath, we hold. And the very first thing that's going to happen to most people is they feel uncomfortable holding a full breath. They're like, this doesn't feel right. Immediately. Some people immediately are like, I need to breathe. I need to breathe. I need to let it go.
Because there's so much air in their lungs, like because they're not used to feeling that full.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, so then I'll talk through people. I'll be like, okay, where do you feel full? Can you try and focus on that area and relax it? Where do you feel tension? Can you release that tension? Or I'll try and direct their attention away from what they're feeling and have them focus on their feet or their hands. A lot of people will immediately clench their jaws. So just talking them through that with a simple body scan exercise, just having them really focus on their body parts so that their mind can't go to, I've got to breathe, I got to breathe.
Yeah.
And then when they get the feeling that they do have to breathe, which once again are just what we call the urge to breathe, or triggers that the mind sends to the body saying it's time to, you've reached that level of CO2, it's time to offload. It's like, okay, let's really examine those feelings one at a time. Can you relax for 2 to 3 seconds with that feeling? Can you accept that feeling in your body and just relax with it? And they're like, okay. And then they let go and they're like, well, I was only able to do it for 5 seconds. It's like, really? Well, you just held your breath for a minute 45. So as soon as you give the brain a task, a focused task, and take it away from that awful feeling, all of a sudden you're able to sort of work with that awful feeling. You have to name it. So a lot of people are like, I just felt like I need to breathe. I need to breathe. And it's like, no, wait a minute. I want you to do a simple breath hold. And I just want you to spend a few seconds so that you can actually articulate to me, what does that mean, I need to breathe? Because I don't know what that means. Do you have the need to swallow? Do you feel tension in your chest? Do you feel a burning? Like, what do you mean I need to breathe? So they do a breath hold and they're focused 100% on, okay, I got to be able to articulate this. And the next thing you know, they've held their breath for 2:30 because they've been thinking about it.
Yeah, right. So you're basically distracting them from the idea of holding their breath, or kind of funneling them into the deep details of holding their breath, which distracts them at the same time, I guess.
Which is basically a form of mindfulness. Or I always tell people after they've done their first few breaths, sorry to tell you, you've signed up for a class on meditation, because that's what it is. It's like, it sounds super, super simple. And anyone who meditates knows that it's the hardest thing in the world, but it is that. And as soon as you're able to focus your mind, it's amazing what we're all capable of.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And we all have it within us. It's totally natural. I've worked with people in their 60s. I've worked with people that are very, very young, like Alex. We all have it within us. It's there. It's dormant. We just don't access it.
Yeah. So I've been shooting underwater for like full time for like 7 or 8 years, but I was a water baby. I grew up, swimming in swimming pools and holding my breath. But what I have learned about myself since sort of doing this as a career is that if I try and hold my breath, like if I try and time myself, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm thinking about is holding my breath. But if I'm down doing a take or, shooting something or whatever, I can be down there for like 2 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and not even know about it
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so distracted from the process of holding my breath.
That's exactly it. And you've hit on one of the basic tenets of freediving. I mean, brand new freedivers come in, and the first thing they do when they ascend from a dive is look at their computer. How deep did I go? And sometimes I take people's computers away from them. And
Yeah.
it's like, I just did an advanced course this weekend, an 8 of 4, which, allows people to dive to 38 meters. And I've got
Wow.
these like super capable divers. And, they've been diving for quite a while and they're quite comfortable. And one of them said to me, I can hold my breath for this amount of time and I can never go past it. And I was like, okay, well, on your first warm up dive on the line, I want you to pull down to whatever depth and not look at your computer and just feel. And when you get a diaphragmatic contraction, I don't want to get too technical here, but once you experience a diaphragmatic contraction, it's sort of a signal that we use. Once you experience your first diaphragmatic contraction, I want you to come up very slowly on the line and reassuring to yourself that you're okay and that you must continue to relax. And he came up on his first pull down and immediately almost doubled his
Oh, right.
previous time, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is, and I wish I could think about the name of this person. I heard a documentary on CBC, which is our Canadian version of the BBC and ABC in Australia, with I think he was an Irish priest. And it was really, really interesting listening to him. He said, children, you watch children engaging in anything and they're like, is this fun? And as soon as it stops being fun, they literally drop it. They drop the crayon and run and find something else. And then you watch adults, and the first thing we do, especially when we feel vulnerable, when we're trying something new or something that we're placing judgment on ourselves about, first thing we say after we finish it is it good or did it suck? Like we judge
Right.
everything we do. And so having these external judgments like depth, time, immediately tension is going to rise because we're placing this external judgment on ourselves. And that's another thing I really want to say to people when I train with them is that you walk around all day being judged by people. Like, why are you putting this on yourself? Let go of your judgment
Yeah.
completely. Like, put down the numbers, put down the time. The focus should be, how do I feel? Is this fun?
Yeah.
I should be able to come up with a smile. And when I'm working with people underwater, even with Braden, I really put emphasis on that. If this doesn't feel good, you come up because none of us are here to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We want you to perform feeling 100% comfortable. And like Braden, just love working with her because she's really great and she's really able to communicate with performers well. And because she's a free diver herself and a deep free diver herself, Braden, and I coach her as an athlete
Right.
and also an open water swimmer. And we've been working with her just swimming through the winter, and she's adapted really well to cold water. So, I mean, she gets those concepts because she's lived them. It's one thing I think, and this is hard for me to speak to because I'm not a photographer, but it's one thing to be behind a camera always with your mask on. But I think if you've actually, and I'm sure you have, once you take your mask off and try and do what they're doing, you get how hard it
Oh,
is.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
it is shockingly hard.
It's shockingly hard for those of us that are adapted in the water and spend our lives in the water. Still, those tanks are black. They're not swimming pools. They're not bright lights. Like, they're black. You take your mask off and you're blind.
Oh yeah, and it's a black void. You have no sense of space. There's a bit of kind of vertigo because you can't work out where anything is anymore. It's
And you don't know
confronting.
you don't know what depth you're at. And that's scary, like in a 16-foot pool for people that aren't used to, like, it's scary. It's like you don't know where
Yeah.
you are. We want you in mid-water. And once again, Braden's great. And she really works with directors that maybe have not done work in the water before, explaining how important it is to continually talk to people on the underwater speaker. Just stream of talk. Okay, looking good. Look a little bit to your right. Okay, you look fantastic. I want you to move toward the camera. Like, just never stop talking because that's their lifeline, what they hear
Yeah.
on the speaker.
That's
They
grounding them.
It's grounding them. And we use lights. We've really learned to get some bright lights to hold behind the camera because, of course, a lot of times it's like, look at the camera, the housing's black, Braden's all in black,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pool is black. They have no idea where the camera is. So a lot of times we'll, work with Braden so that, behind the camera, we can like move a really bright light so at least they can see that.
Right. So it's just a reference for them so they can see, the camera's over there. That's the direction I need to be.
Exactly. Or I need to swim. Like in Siren, it was crazy what we were doing underwater, like just pulling them on lines while another person is swimming through and Braden's panning and swimming, you know, and the person's got to swim to camera the whole time and they can't see it. So there was a lot of moving parts underwater, fight scenes with spears and they're blind. It was intense.
What's the biggest number of people you've had to deal with in the water at one time on one of these productions?
Oh gosh, on the crossing, we must have had 15 stunt performers all in the water on breath hold at the same time. And in fact, I was one of them and Braden was one of them. Yeah. So all of us in the water at the same time, sinking from the top to the bottom of the tank and then just waiting, death sequence where we were all sort of drowning mid-water.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've had people like a lot of people in the water like that. Yeah. Usually what we like to do is, obviously when someone's on breath hold, it's 1-to-1. You want to be able to, if someone gives you that single signal, immediately rush down and bring them to the surface if they're on breath hold.
Right. You're talking in terms of safety and talent.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
One person to one person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got 15 people in the water, is there 15 safety divers there as well?
Well, in that situation, there wasn't. There just simply wasn't room for them. But they were all, like I said, stunt performers.
Yeah. So they're all trained for this anyway.
They had all gone through the training, all gone through the underwater training with us, and understood the bailout protocols. And we had a bunch of surface swimmers with buoyancy. And as soon as somebody swam up to the surface, you just threw buoyancy at them and moved on to the next. Okay. So that's what, just a lot of support at the surface. So we were all weighted to sink in that situation. And some of us just dropped our weights and left them on the bottom and would float up buoyant.
That's amazing.
It's such an individual thing. It really is Braden explaining to me the shot or what she wants to see and then asking her, does this work for you? If I put weights here, can I do this? And she'll say yay or nay. And then we just try it out with the actor or the performer and off we go. Once again, because she's a free diver, she gets a lot of what they need and she's really able to, come up with innovative ways of making that work. We use weights a lot.
Right. How are you hiding the weights? Like, I assume people are in costume and stuff. So are you just hiding things under their dresses or under their clothing?
We use chiclets a lot. You know what I mean by chiclets? They're like the little half-pound weights that a lot of scuba divers or I guess dry suit divers use around their ankles. They're like hard half-pound weights, but they're very, very small and flat. So, we make belts and we can adjust them to any size. So
they're quite thin, like a thin lead weight.
Yeah, and very, very small, like maybe an inch by an inch in terms of...
Oh, okay. So like a matchbox size.
Yeah, absolutely. And even smaller than that, yeah. And so we can string them at the top of their chest or, on their ankles, under socks or whatever.
So you're getting quite creative with how you're putting them on and hiding them in places.
Absolutely. Under breasts, because, they're so small. We like to put a lot of weight under breasts so that the breasts can just sit on top of the weight. Because, of course, that's your greatest buoyancy is your chest because that's where you're holding your air. So we want to do that. Luckily, like the biggest issue actually, so muscle sinks and fat floats. So, women and men have to be weighted differently depending on how people want to see them sink. Often we get a shot where they really want to see people sink on their back. And like, that's hard, especially for men because their legs are so muscular. They're automatically always going to want to sink leg first. So we actually hide buoyancy sometimes in the lower body.
Oh, well, just with some foam or something or?
Old wetsuits that we cut up, neoprene.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And, and then we'll put the weights on the back of the lungs. hidden under a shirt if we can. We've had scenes where we had a stunt performer wearing a pair of underwear, and I basically had to hand him some of the chiclets and say, okay, you decide what you want to look like. If you want to put
Right,
them in the
yeah.
back or do you want to put them in the front?
Do you want
You
to
can
look like
get,
you've pooped yourself, or do you want to
yeah,
look like you're very happy?
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can guess what he decided. But it's
Yeah.
like, you stick it into your underwear. And like I
Yeah.
said, women, I'm, very comfortable working with women,
Yeah.
obviously. And we try and hide them under the breast is a really, really good spot for women. But we often, because women are just built differently than men, we often need to add a little bit more weight around their hips. So
Right.
that's a matter of where do you put it. I'd rather put it on the inside of the legs if they're keeping their legs together than on the outside. And it just depends on what they're wearing and how see-through it is. And, if it's clingy, you don't want it anywhere where it's going to show.
Yeah.
So, and then we use soft weights as well. So we just have an arsenal of weight.
And that's really interesting. I've never really thought about, I mean, outside of my own work where I'm like, okay, we need to weight you because you're way too buoyant. We'll
Hmm.
hide a weight belt under that massive skirt. But
Hmm.
thinking about putting, hiding buoyancy on people to kind of leven them out, you kind of got to, we talk about
Hmm.
trimming a camera housing, but you're
Hmm.
almost trimming the talent so that they fall in a way that you're expecting.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's so important. The director has a vision that he or she wants to see the person, fall in a certain way, and the body doesn't naturally do that. Well, how do we make that work for them?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we do that. You can make anything work with buoyancy and with weights.
Right.
And by buoyancy, I mean neoprene. As you can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one pushes you up, one pulls you down. It's just a combination
Exactly.
of those to make it work.
Exactly. Yeah. You just play with it until you get what you want. And the benefit is if we know beforehand, then, and if costumes is willing to give us the costume beforehand, we can sort that all out in training sessions, which is what we really try and do. Really try and get a hold of storyboards beforehand or, talk to the director. Braden will try and talk to the director and say, exactly what do you want to see? And then she can say, I need to see this. And I can figure it out in the pool with the actor. And also that's fantastic because then they've practiced it and they know what's coming up.
Yeah. Did you work with costume department to sort of say, oh, can we put a pocket in this to hide some weights, or is it
Yeah.
very
Oh, yeah.
separate?
In Siren, we hid weights in wetsuits. Like they literally sewed them in down the spine, which was he was, at the final sequence in Siren, he sort of dives in with a wetsuit, but he's not wearing a weight belt and he finds that he's perfectly neutral. Well, that's not possible as we know. So we just talked with
Yeah.
them but where we could hide it. And they actually sewed soft weights all down the length of the zipper on both sides. So it was totally invisible, but
Oh, okay.
it gave him exactly what he needed. And we worked with Best Film, who are like this amazing company that does fabrics for underwater and for surface for film sets, basically any
Right.
type of fabric, green screens, blacks, whatever. And we did a wedding shoot for Eileen Powell, who was the lead on Siren. Put her in a wedding dress, and they were able to sew in like some buoyancy, like little ping pong balls under the
Oh,
dress,
to
and
give it some life
to give it some life and movement, and some weights in other areas just to allow the dress to move. So yeah, you can do anything with weights and buoyancy. It's pretty cool, and that's a fun part of it. That's creative, you
Oh,
know.
totally. Yeah. And you're kind of inventing stuff when you do that. Like you've got to
Yeah.
problem solve.
Yeah, that's what I love about film. It's so much fun. I mean, first of all, you got to get the trust of the performer, and they've got to build up that trust in themselves. And then once you've got that, they're keen to try anything. I mean, we do so many things to these poor people, but they're
Yeah.
just like, bring it
They're up
on.
for it. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
exactly.
they're up
Yeah.
for it, and that's so cool.
That's incredible. Are you
Yeah.
doing stuff that's on location as well, or are you mostly in
Hmm.
tanks?
Most of the underwater stuff is in tanks just because visibility here is not like, visibility in the tropics. You just don't get the kind of
Yeah.
visibility in cold water that you do in the tropics. And of course, then you have other restrictions like cold water, like how long can a person stay in the water? So underwater stuff is generally done in tanks here, although we have done some, but we do a lot of surface stuff in the water, yeah. And I mean, we had our mermaids diving into the ocean here in November and January and February. And so we do cold water, work with them and a lot of support in that way, but yeah, year round.
So that's the other thing, is that you kind of specialize in cold water
hmm
conditioning. What does that involve? What's the kind of process of getting used to freediving in cold water?
Well, free diving and cold water adaptation are two different things. We want to be warm when we're holding our breath. As soon as you start to shiver, you kind of lose your breath hold. So,
Right.
as athletes, we're doing two different things when we're adapting to cold water and adapting to breath hold. That said, we don't always have that luxury in film. So, adaptation to cold water is really not feasible for the film industry because you sort of have to maintain, it takes a while to build up that cold water adaptation, and then you need to maintain it by constant immersion. So, rather than adaptation, we're looking at making sure the performer is comfortable, is aware of the feelings, understands what's happening to their body, and is safe. So, what we want to do is make sure the core temperature is as warm as possible before they enter the water, but that they're not sweating. We don't want their pores dilated.
Oh, okay.
We don't want their blood vessels dilated and open so that they will have an extra shock. The biggest issue with cold water is, a cardiac event, basically, because when you enter cold water, especially very cold water, and the water here does get very cold in the winter, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to vasoconstrict quite dramatically. So all the blood vessels in your extremities are going to close and a bunch of blood is going to be driven to your core. And that's just the body's way of protecting the organs, the heart.
Yeah. Does that push your blood pressure up as well?
Absolutely. And that's why people start to hyperventilate immediately when they enter the cold water. You're going to get people that are hyperventilating. And when you start to hyperventilate, you automatically, your brain registers panic. It's almost the same response as a fight or flight experience. And so
Right.
then tension goes up, panic goes up. And that's, as you know, as a diver, that's when situations can happen. And also, of course, if you have any kind of a heart issue, that increased blood pressure is going to put strain
Put
on your heart.
strain.
So the idea is, what we try and do is, first of all, we really want people to understand what cold water is. So the fear of it honestly has their heart rate running before they enter it. Generally, if people have never been in cold water and they have a cold water take, sometimes just the
Yeah.
anxiety. It's a night shoot. We had a night shoot on, I can't remember the name of the show, where one of the lead actors had to run in the water for a skinny dipping scene. And, it's nighttime, it's cold. So the idea is keep them warm as much as possible, keep them covered up as much as possible. You don't want, and, a lot of times it's the stunt performer doing this, and they're standing at the edge of the cliff where they're going to jump in, or the edge of the water, and they're in like whatever costume, in the wind chill, in the rain, waiting for the, final tweaks. And it's like, no, we want to keep them as warm as possible before they enter,
Right.
and then have somebody in the water, have them be completely aware of what they're going to experience. They are going to experience hyperventilation, and the goal is to actually slow down your breath. Anybody out there that does Wim Hof, please don't comment on this. As every freediving instructor is, we're sort of very anti Wim Hof. And as any, not anti Wim Hof, I don't want to say that. Do your thing. Free diving and swimming cold water has nothing to do with Wim Hof. So,
What's Wim Hof?
Wim Hof is a very popular method of hyperventilation that he believes extends or maybe improves your adaptation to cold water, which I kind of think is, as someone who's swum cold water and as someone that has worked with people that are English Channel swimmers and knows, is not at all relevant.
Right.
It's just about relaxation and breathing through it, and adaptation, actually just adapting to cold water and developing brown fat. But anyway, I just wanted to put that caveat out there because I have so many people practicing that method that approach what we're doing with hyperventilation, and that's super, super dangerous for free diving and also for cold water immersion.
Right. And the problem with hyperventilation is that you could cause yourself to pass out, right?
You can cause yourself to pass out. In free diving, what you're doing is offloading CO2, and CO2 is actually what brings on those uncomfortable feelings that tell us it's time to breathe. And those uncomfortable feelings are actually our signal for where we are in our breath hold. So we
Right.
don't want to
Dull
we don't want to
them.
stop them, because if we do,
Right.
we could actually hold our breath until we're in a low oxygen situation. And that becomes dangerous. That's when you might have a blackout or a loss of motor control. So what
Right.
we do as free divers is rather than offload CO2 so that you don't feel those feelings, we learn to tolerate those feelings
Yeah. Which
through.
is that tight convulsion of your chest when it makes you feel like you need to breathe, but you can push past it.
Well, everybody experiences it differently. Some people
Okay.
experience it like a tightness in the chest. That is very common. Some people experience it like a need to swallow. Some people experience it much more as thoughts in the brain. And
Okay.
I wouldn't say push past it just because the connotations of that are like fight or tension.
Right. Yeah.
It more that sit in it for a few seconds at a time until you understand what it is. And in fact, that we can actually, with time and experience and learning to tolerate those feelings better, they end up coming later and later and later as the body then says, okay, well, you don't really need to breathe. Your level of CO2 is not dangerous or super high. It's just set here because you've never played with it before.
Right.
So
Yeah.
learning to tolerate those feelings. In cold water, hyperventilation is certainly not going to help you in any way, because if you're doing a swim, especially, a middle distance or a distance swim, you don't want to be raising your heart rate by hyperventilating, and you don't want
Right.
to be, you want to like long, slow, deep breaths. So, being completely relaxed and then just start swimming in a careful manner until that hyperventilation sort of, we call it immersion shock or cold water shock, subsides a little bit and your body becomes a
Yeah.
little more adapted.
And that's when you jump into cold water, like you jump into a cold swimming pool, and then you're just like,
Yeah,
like you feel like you
exactly.
can't breathe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're just kind
And then
of letting that subside.
yeah, you're letting that subside. And we do that in a head up position, if at all possible. So I like to, if I can't because of a wig or actually, let me backtrack again. So as swimmers, we enter the cold water. We're not going to start swimming with our face in the water till we've gotten through that period. So that means
Right.
either moving into the water slowly, allowing the vasoconstriction to happen naturally if you're a new person in cold water, and then maybe swimming as you're moving through it, maybe practice like 3 breaths head up, 3 breaths head down, or 1 up, 1 and down until you actually subside into it, and then you can drop your head in the water and naturally start to breathe in a more natural rhythm. We don't often have that luxury when we're on set. Sometimes it's jumping off a cliff in a bikini in November,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and it is what it is. So in that case, what I would do is keep the body as warm as possible, and then maybe use cold packs on the wrists and ankles of the person or on the face. So areas of the body that will immediately start to vasoconstrict before you enter the water, just so the body is a little bit prepared for what's going to happen, and then immediately weight a person so that they're buoyant, and then have people in the water with a lot of buoyancy and able to swim really quickly to support that person and keep that head out of the water. We don't want them aspirating any water. That's our big issue with cold water. I mean, there's cold water shock, immersion shock, that is a massive, massive issue. And then paying attention to, yeah, keeping their airways out of the water while they're breathing, because a lot of times in cold water, you're going to lose the ability to maintain buoyancy. Buoyancy is massive in cold water. Anywhere we can hide neoprene, instead of socks, throw on some neoprene socks,
Right. Is
like
that because in the cold water you would sink more because you're hyperventilating, you're not breathing properly? Or is it just a matter of keeping the body higher in the water just for safety and for comfort?
both and everything. Keeping that body, having somebody come up and feel buoyant is going to make them feel a lot more relaxed than fighting to stay up at the surface. And if
Gotcha.
they're doing take after take and you start to lose, remember when you're vasoconstricted, right? Your limbs aren't getting oxygenated. They start to feel very heavy. And so if you're spending a lot of time in the water, it becomes harder and harder to keep yourself up, because just moving the limbs to do whatever, tread water or swim, they're very heavy and it becomes hard. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, if they're in costumes and they're soaked and they're heavy, hide neoprene everywhere. And people often say, I can't hide neoprene underneath this costume. Well, you can hide neoprene everywhere. We work with a really amazing free diving wetsuit manufacturer, which is based here in Vancouver. They're one of the best wetsuit manufacturers in the world. They're called
Right.
Oceaner Freediving. And they we've brought freediving technology to set. Well, they will make, flesh colored
Well, yeah, right.
suits in
Yeah.
any configuration that we need, so we can hide it anywhere.
Yeah.
We can, even like a little like bikini bottom that maybe comes up a little higher, that's going to help you,
Yeah. Even if you've got like a 7 mil undies on or something.
Even 3 mil, like any neoprene is going to help you, right? Any neoprene. If you can't wear 7 mil, wear 3 mil, And on Anna Ferris, when we were shooting with her on Overboard, when we worked with her, she had to be in the Fraser River, which is, quite cold. So we actually got a freediving suit made for her,
Oh, okay.
in flesh colored neoprene that she wore under a costume that's totally invisible, but was so warm and just so buoyant for her.
That's
And we
perfect.
just did that. We used a lot of freediving wetsuit manufacturing technology on the haunting of Bly Manor, which we finished. Yeah, which was shooting, outside all through the winter with snow and everything, with all of our lead cast in the water. So,
oh God, yeah. That sounds intense.
It's amazing what, and the thing is too, is that working with actors and stunt performers, I'm constantly blown away by just their ability to just focus through anything. It's like,
yeah,
they're very talented. And a lot of people, as looking from the outside might think that they don't have the fortitude, but it is amazing what they're willing to do and put themselves through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I love about this podcast is that I get to speak to people like yourself and actual talent and the crew, and the things that we take for granted in a lot of these productions, to find out how hard that was to do and how amazing it was for the cast and the crew to be able to push through and do this thing.
Yeah, totally. It's incredible. I'm blown away. We get some of these very young actors, and they just do it. You say, okay, we're going to be doing this. We'll build up to it. And they're like, all right, we're going to do it. And on the day, they just show up and do it. It's pretty cool to watch. It's pretty. And then, of course, we have a lot of support afterward. That's super important. The other thing that I would state is that you commonly see when we're doing cold water, people wanting to put an actor right in hot water, right in a hot tub afterward. And that's something we don't do in Vancouver. Like, all of us, we're pretty aware of cold water issues.
Yeah.
You don't want to be putting someone from cold water into hot water, and especially not from cold water. Okay, warm up and let's do another take in cold water. Just the strain you're putting on the heart, which is like constricting the blood vessels and then dilating them, super hard, and then constricting them again. You're just putting so much pressure on the heart that, it's super dangerous. So we always have hot tubs on set. Like, we work with Crosby Marine, which is like a fantastic company up here that provides everything. But the performer doesn't go into the hot tub until, first of all, they're done for the day. And then we monitor how they enter the hot tub. It's not going to be a full immersion, like maybe hands and feet only. Once again, let the body warm up slowly and naturally allow those blood vessels to dilate, and naturally allow that cold water blood to intermingle with the hot or with the warm blood in your system, so that you're not shocking your system by opening those blood vessels immediately and then, maybe risking cold blood traveling through the heart. So it's just being really, really aware of the issues, really being aware of the signs of hyperventilation, how to warm people up safely, how to make sure that they enter the water safely. These are all really big issues around here. And we have an amazing stunt community here, and they're very aware of issues like that.
Yeah. And I guess that's the skill of having people like yourself on set or involved in these productions, is that you have the experience with this stuff, because, who else is going to think about those things? Yeah, no, it's great. It's great being able to use this to make something work on camera. I mean, it's all in service of the performance. Ultimately, everything we do is in service of the performance. Trying to make the actor feel comfortable, or the stunt performer, so that they can do what is required of them. And they pull it off. Yeah, exactly. And then we have these amazing shows and movies that we enjoy. And images. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it all goes into photography as well. And then people look at that and go, oh, it looks so peaceful. I want to try it. It looks so easy and beautiful. And you're like, oh, you have no idea what this person is going through. That's to make themselves look completely relaxed and beautiful. Yeah. No, that's great. Roberta, thanks so much. This has been really educational. I've gotten so much from this. And just hearing the techniques and everything, it's just been great.
Thank you very much. It's been really fun. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe. If you'd like to connect with us or just learn more about my guests, you can hit our website at theunderwaterpodcast.com or on Instagram or Facebook. Also check out our regular live streams on YouTube. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to know more about my underwater photography workshops and mentoring, you can find me at brettstanley.com. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.